The leather seat felt cold beneath Marcus Wellington III as he slid into the back of his Mercedes S-Class, his $1,000 shoes clicking against the polished floor mat. He was already late for the charity gala where he'd be giving yet another speech about giving back to the community, ironic, considering he'd just fired 30 employees to boost quarterly profits. His phone buzzed with stock alerts as the driver merged into evening traffic. The city lights, blurring past tinted windows that separated him from a world he no longer truly saw. Then he heard it. A small, fierce voice from somewhere behind his seat. "Shut up!" Marcus froze, his finger hovering over his phone screen. Had he imagined it? He glanced at his driver, Richard, whose eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. The privacy partition was raised. They were alone, or so he thought. "Shut up and listen," the voice came again, clearer this time. Definitely a child. Definitely a girl. And definitely inside his car. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. His hand moved toward the door handle as his mind raced through possibilities, kidnapping, ransom, some elaborate scheme. He was worth $847 million, give or take a few million depending on the market. He'd always known his wealth made him a target, but this? In his own car? "Richard, pull over," Marcus commanded, his voice sharp with authority and barely concealed panic. "Sir?" Richard's confused eyes met his in the rearview mirror. "Now, pull over now." The Mercedes glided to the curb, and Marcus threw open his door, stumbling onto the sidewalk. He yanked open the opposite door, ready to confront whoever had infiltrated his sanctuary of luxury and privacy. What he found instead stopped him cold. Huddled in the footwell behind the driver's seat was a girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old, with tangled dark hair and eyes that held more weariness than any child should. She was wearing a thin pink jacket, wrong, for the autumn chill, and clutching a battered backpack against her chest like a shield. She didn't look dangerous. She looked terrified. "Please don't be mad," she whispered, shrinking further into the corner. "I just needed somewhere warm. Just for a little while." Marcus stood frozen, one hand still gripping the door. In 47 years of life, 30 of them spent building an empire from his father's already considerable fortune. He had encountered every type of person imaginable. Ruthless competitors, ambitious executives, desperate job seekers, professional con artist. But he had never in all those years found a child hiding in his car. When did you? He couldn't even formulate the question. "When you stopped at the coffee shop," she said quietly. "The door was unlocked for just a second when your driver got out." "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It's getting cold at night now and the car looked so warm, and I thought maybe I could just stay for a few minutes before you noticed. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I was trying to be so quiet." Richard had gotten out now and was staring at the girl with his mouth open. "Sir, I swear I had no idea." Marcus held up his hand, silencing him. His mind was working now, processing, calculating not profits and losses this time, but the situation before him. A runaway, clearly. Or homeless, or... "Where are your parents?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been in years. The girl's face crumpled and she looked away. "My mom. She's gone. And my dad, he drinks a lot now. He gets really angry. I tried to stay, I really did. But last week She lifted her sleeve slightly, revealing a bruise that had faded to a sickly yellow-green. "So I left. I've been staying in different places. The library during the day, doorways at night. It's not so bad most of the time." Something twisted in Marcus's chest. A sensation so unfamiliar, it took him a moment to recognize it as genuine emotion, unfiltered by business strategy or social positioning. He thought of his own daughter, Sophia, safe at her elite boarding school in Connecticut, worried about nothing more serious than her college applications and whether she'd make varsity tennis. This girl was roughly the same age, give or take a year. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma." "Emma, I'm Marcus. And you're right about one thing, you need somewhere warm. But not the back of my car." He pulled out his phone, and Emma's eyes widened with fear. "Please don't call the police. They'll just send me back or put me in a home or—" "I'm not calling the police," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "I'm calling someone who can actually help. Richard, cancel the gala appearance. Tell them I had an emergency. Because I do." Over the next 3 hours, Marcus Wellington III did something he'd never done before. He put another person's needs entirely before his own schedule, his reputation, his carefully curated public image. He called his personal physician, Dr. Sarah Chen, who met them at her private practice to examine Emma's injuries and malnutrition. He called his lawyer, not to protect himself, but to understand the legal pathway to help a child in crisis. He called the director of a highly reputable social services organization he'd donated to for years but never actually visited. And then he did something even more extraordinary. He listened. As Emma sat wrapped in a blanket from Dr. Chen's office, eating her second sandwich and first hot meal in 3 days, she told her story, not because anyone forced her, but because for the first time in months, someone was actually listening. She talked about her mother's death from cancer 18 months ago, about her father's descent into alcoholism and rage, about the teachers who'd noticed something was wrong but whose calls to child services led nowhere because her father could be charming when he needed to be. She talked about sleeping in parks and eating from restaurant dumpsters and reading books in the library until closing time. Because stories let her escape into worlds where children were safe and loved. Marcus listened to every word, and as he listened, something inside him, something he'd thought dead or at least dormant for decades, began to wake up. He remembered being young, before the weight of wealth and expectation had hardened him into the man he'd become. He remembered believing that money should mean something beyond numbers in an account, that success should be measured in impact rather than assets. "Sir," Richard said quietly, pulling him aside while Emma was being examined, "I've been driving you for 12 years. I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Like a human being, sir, if you'll pardon me saying so." Marcus let out a long breath. "You're pardoned?" "Because you're right." By the time the social worker arrived, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes and efficient manner, Marcus had made several decisions. First, Emma would not be going into the system tonight. She would be staying in one of the secure, comfortable rooms at the Marcus Wellington Foundation building, which he'd established years ago, primarily for tax benefits, but which actually did have facilities for emergency housing that he'd never bothered to see used properly. Second, he was personally funding a full investigation into her father's fitness as a parent, with the goal of ensuring Emma's safety above all else. Third, he was reassigning his best legal team to work not on his latest acquisition, but on Emma's case. But the decision that surprised him most was the fourth one. He was going to stay involved, not as a distant philanthropist writing checks from afar, but as someone who actually gave a damn about what happened to this child. "Why are you doing this?" Emma asked him before he left that night. She looked up at him with those two old eyes, as if she'd learned long ago not to trust in kindness without question. Marcus knelt down so they were eye to eye, something else he never did, crease his $5,000 suit on a floor, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he answered with complete honesty. "Because you told me to shut up and listen," he said. "And for the first time in a very long time, I actually did. I heard you, Emma. I heard what you weren't saying, what you couldn't say. I heard the part of you that's still fighting, still hoping that someone might notice, might care. And I realized that I've spent 30 years building an empire while not hearing anything that mattered. You gave me something tonight. You reminded me what it means to be human. The least I can do is make sure you're safe." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "My mom used to say that real richness isn't in your bank account. It's in your heart." Marcus felt his own eyes burning. "Your mother was a wise woman, and she raised a brave daughter." 6 months later, Marcus Wellington III stood in a courtroom as a judge, granted him temporary guardianship of Emma Martinez, while her father completed a supervised rehabilitation program. It wasn't a perfect solution. Few things in life were, but it was the right one. Emma would be safe, supported, and most importantly heard. His business associates thought he'd lost his mind. His quarterly profits had dipped because he'd started actually paying attention to where he cut costs, refusing to sacrifice jobs for marginally better returns. He'd restructured his foundation to focus on meaningful impact rather than tax benefits. He'd even moved out of his penthouse into a smaller home where Emma could have stability and he could have purpose. But as he watched Emma really smile for the first time since that night in his car, Marcus realized something profound. He hadn't lost his mind. He'd found his humanity, all because a little girl had been brave enough to tell a millionaire to shut up and listen. And finally, after all these years, he had